Right.
All right, looks like we are good to go. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Alicia Drinky, and I am the Dairy Management Specialist on the Southwest New York Dairy Livestock and Field Crops team. And my colleague Betsy Hicks on the South Central New York Dairy and Field Crops program is kind of my co-host moderator for today. And we are really pleased to have Don Burkhardt, a nutritionist with Cows Come First, presenting for us today on grazing annual forages. And Don also has some beef cows, is my understanding. But you'll hear a little bit more about that in just a little bit. We do want to remind everybody that we encourage audience participation. So if you have questions for Don, please feel free to submit those to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And we're also going to try, when we get to the Q&A section, if you want to ask a question verbally, we should have the ability to unmute you. So there should be like a raise hand feature that you see on your Zoom screen. Go ahead and raise your hand and we will get you unmuted when we're at the question section. So we will offer that opportunity for you later on. If you're having any sort of technical issues or need assistance with anything else, definitely drop that into the chat function for us. And of course, we are recording today's session, and the recording, as well as any of the other materials presented, are going to be available to you through that box link, which hopefully most of you will have accessed by now. And with that, Don, I'm going to pass it to you and take it away.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. And this is really one of my favorite subjects to talk about. So I work with dairies all over Western New York, or yeah, from Cayuga County all the way west to Chautauqua County. And I got to say, I feed a bunch of cows, and every dairy I work with feeds at least some annual forages. And I've got pasture dairies and conventional dairies that all feed annual forages. So this is a dairy in Phelps, New York that's I've worked with for 20 years. It's J. DeBoover Farms in Phelps. And I just wanted to put a picture of their farm up because it's one of the prettiest dairies around. They milk 950 cows going through the parlor. And just this is the way this farm always looks, and their barns and their cows always look this way. So I have the privilege of working with dairies literally from 30 cows to 3,000 cows. And, you know, sometimes you'll talk about something, nutrition with a dairy, and they'll say, well, how many cows are there? And to me, it really doesn't matter. You know, so I get this 30 cow dairy is a grazing tie stall dairy. They milk in buckets with a flat top bulk tank. And I love working with those guys. And I've got a 3,000 cow dairy that I love working with. It's cows and it's farmers. So to me, it really doesn't matter. They're all ruminants. You know, a beef cow is a ruminant, and goats and sheep, all of them are. And so, you know, we're feeding rumens. That's really what we're working at. So this is not a picture of my place. I am not good at taking pictures, but I have a herd of beef cows here, a small herd of beef cows that's growing. Last year, we calved 7 out. This year, we're calving 19. I don't know. I like the dairy thing and the farm thing where these animals just multiply. So who knows? I don't know. Maybe we'll have 60 or 70 or 100 mama cows in a few years, but it's fun to have them, and it's fun to watch them grow. I also raise Holstein heifers for a local dairy. I've got 25 heifers here that I'm raising. They're 10 months old right now. So I feed them a little differently than maybe a commercial dairy or a commercial grower would, just because I'm a nutritionist. And if I can't raise heifers for a dairy, I probably would not do very well as nutrition, you know, as a nutritionist. So that's my place. I have beef cows and Holstein heifers. So here's our first poll question. I think this is really important for any crop, but how often do you fertilize your pastures or hay fields?
So our options here, at least 1 time per year, every 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, or never. And so for my farm, we're doing at least once per year. I'm not going to put my response in there to bungle things up, but that's where we would fit. All right, looks like we're pretty split. 50% of people on said 1 time per year, and 2 people said every 1 to 3 years, and 1 person never. So there's our split there, Don.
Thank you. That's great information. So I fertilize my pastures twice a year, my hay fields and my pastures at least twice a year, and I apply manure at least once a year. So the first step here, where'd it go? This is gosh, why did I do that? All right, so this is a sample. This is kind of a local hay that this was grown. I have some neighbors that grow hay like this, and this is unfertilized and there's low pH, low fertility soil. So when I sent this sample off here a month ago, they couldn't use their NIR equipment to get a good accurate read. So I had to run NDF digestibility with wet chem, and that's why that NDF in the middle of the screen, that 30-hour NDF is highlighted. So they ran it first, and I called them up and I said, get that sample over to me. And they said, well, it was so low, we want to replicate that a few more times before we send it to you. And I said, I don't care, send it. So as it ended up, it came back at 28 30-hour NDFD. So, you know, it's only 8% protein over here, you can see, and it's high in NDF, and it's very, very low digestibility. So if you do not fertilize, we really need to do that. We need to correct our pH. That's first. That makes nutrients more available to the crop, and then we need to apply fertilizer. Grasses really thrive on nitrogen. We also need to add sulfur to that. I have the honor to work with Western New York crop agronomists, and they tell me that the old recommendation was 1 unit of sulfur for 10 units of nitrogen. And now they're recommending 7 units of sulfur for each 10 units of, seven instead of 10%. Gosh, I don't know how I did that. It's supposed to be more sulfur anyway. So I'm sorry. It's instead of 10% sulfur, it should be 12 or 14% sulfur. And the reason for that is we are not getting sulfur out of the air. You know, the acid rain has been greatly reduced with emissions from factories now. So we used to get that free in the rain, and now we don't. So we really need to add sulfur as well. So you can see the difference in tons of dry matter as we increase nitrogen to these crops. So, you know, we're all farmers, and we all are worried about inputs and how to reduce inputs and make the most, increase our efficiencies. But when it comes to nutrients for crops and for cows, you know, you can only cut so far. If your car is empty, it's out of gas, and you want to drive another 50 miles, it's not going to go. So it's really the same thing with nutrients for our crops. And I really believe that healthy soils and healthy crops lead to healthy cows. So this is a worksheet that there's several of these here, but I pass this around to dairies I work with, and it's a quick worksheet to determine what nutrients your crops are removing, what fertilizers are adding, and what you need. So I really don't care what you're using for fertilizer. If you want to use poultry manure, cow manure, that's fine. I do think that we still need to add some commercial fertilizers in order to balance these out. Buddy of mine sent me an email here a few weeks ago from On Pasture, and they talked about synthetic fertilizers, where do they come from, and what it does and what it doesn't do. And it was if you go to On Pasture and look back in their archives, you'll find that article. It was really, really good. And it even talked about anhydrous, which I don't like, but anhydrous did not damage our soils like some people talk, so there is some value in commercial fertilizer. This part of the worksheet determines the manure applicating rate. These are values of different manures. So, and I've tested a bunch of these. I've tested dairy manure, beef manure, and poultry litter to see how close they are to these values, and they're really, really close. So I think this is a good worksheet to start with if you're applying manure, and from there you can supplement with your commercial fertilizers. This chart, I'm sorry, it's a little crooked there, but I did that when I scanned it in. This chart shows removal of nutrients by tons. So on the right-hand side, it's wet crops. The left-hand side, there's haylage. And you can see what each one of those crops removes. Those are at 35% dry matter because they're silages. So, if you just figure your tons or your expected tons, and you can come up with what each crop removes. And again, if it's like a cow, we can skimp on energy, for example, and that cow will be okay for a while, but she's going to constantly remove body condition and get thinner and thinner, and eventually she will not produce. And it's really the same with these crops. We really got to feed them. If you're not growing annuals, probably the place to start is to lime your fields and to fertilize your crops and maximize production. That way, maximize soil health, and then you can go to the annuals. So here's the most common annuals that I've dealt with. There's winter annuals that would be planted in the fall, triticale, wheat, and rye. I think probably everyone knows triticale is a cross between wheat and rye. Triticale is my favorite of those. It's consistently a higher yielder, and it gives you a little more of a window to graze or to harvest. And it's probably the best quality on a consistent basis. The cool season annuals are oats, peas, and spring triticale. I've never grown spring triticale. I'm not familiar with it, but I know it's available. Peas and oats are really good annuals to grow. They're great early in the spring, and they're really good in the fall. I've grazed them both times of the year. I've seeded them late August and grazed them late in the fall, and had tremendous crop of them. And I've done the same with them in the spring. The summer annuals are Italian ryegrass, sorghum sedan grass, and teff. I've got a few neighbors that grow teff. It always looks really thick, but really short. So I'm not sure about teff. All right, so I guess the next question is, who's growing annual forages?
Alicia's going to bring that poll up. So our options are, we don't grow any, 10 to 30%. Are you saying of forage dry matter or of acres?
Acres.
Acres, perfect. 30 to 50% of their acres or above 50%. So we would fall in the 10 to 30% because we've done some oats, and this year we planted some cereal rye. So we'll see how that works out. All right, looks like 2 people said none and 4 people said a little bit, 10 to 30%.
All right. So I'm not surprised. And I got interested in growing annual forages, gosh, probably 15 years ago. And as much as anything, we were trying to maximize yields on limited acres. So we started growing triticale or wheat, rye, planting it after corn or soybeans in the fall, and then harvesting it in the spring. But as I started working with those, the feed quality was just fantastic. So we continued on. This slide is a picture of Dan Olson in Wisconsin. I've had the chance to work with Dan for the last couple of years. He's doing a whole bunch of work on feeding, on growing and feeding annuals, and he's got a cocktail mix. I included his Forage Innovations website up here because Dan posts a lot of good information and is really helpful. He's been to New York several times and put meetings on trying to help guys understand why you would grow annuals and how to do it. So Dan's a really good resource. And it's interesting because I've had some seed guys in New York here tell me, well, that's Wisconsin and that doesn't work here in New York. Well, guess what? It does. It really does. All right. So I wanted to go over some forage samples here next and talk about why we would consider annuals when we could just grow perennials and be done with it. So this is a really typical good quality haylage sample. And I wish we could talk while we're doing this, because over on the left here, it's 42 dry matter, 21.8% protein. A lot of times that's as far as people go. They're like, oh, that's great feed. And by the old standards from when I first started as a nutritionist, the rule of thumb was alfalfa 20, 30, 40 is perfect. 20% protein, 30% ADF, 40% NDF. And as you can see here, we've hit all those. We got 21.8% protein, we're 32.9 ADF, and we're 40.3 NDF. Pretty darn good feed, right? Well, I disagree. This alfalfa was considered an excellent forage. But if you go down right here, the 30-hour NDFD, that's, to me, on forage samples, that is the most important number today. Digestibility of the NDF, our fiber. So this one's 47% digestible. And there's so that's okay, I guess. And that's pretty common for alfalfa. That's pretty typical for legumes in general. But if we go down here to the bottom of that column, the UNDF 240 number, that number is what would not be digested if it were in the cow for 240 hours, 10 days. So that's truly undigestible. I guess I got to take one step back, because I've been asked, well, why look at 30-hour NDFDs? And the reason I use that number is that it gives us an idea of how much of that fiber would be digested until it turns to poop. Basically, that's, it's manure after 30 hours probably. So we used to look at the lignin number, which is above that. But this UNDF 240 really gives us a better idea of what's truly undigestible. So that's alfalfa. So this next one is a sample that I took from my buddy up the valley. He's going to recognize this. This is an orchard grass. And on the left-hand side, it's 15% protein. Pretty good. 63.3 30-hour NDFD, pretty darn good, and 21.8 UNDF 240. So it doesn't have the protein that alfalfa has or a legume has, but it really is digestible. And it might be surprising, but I would pick this forage over that alfalfa all day long. So this is a sample of my orchard grass field that I drilled triticale into last fall, and put 75 pounds of 75 units of N on and 7.5 units of sulfur in the spring. And so grasses, again, really respond to nitrogen and they put it into protein. But I do believe they also, it helps fiber digestibility. It makes that plant grow really long and lush, and it really helps your fiber digestibility. So this one is 19.5 protein. It's 76.9% 30-hour NDFT and 13.3% UNDF 240. The bad part of this is a baleage sample, is that my windrows were so big and heavy, and I had a brand new twin rotary rake, and I put 40 feet together into a windrow, and I baled it. I couldn't get it dry. So it's 25% dry matter, which is too wet. And I did get some butyric fermentation in this. So I need to improve on that next year, but this digestibility is fantastic. So here's just a comparison chart showing those three side by side. And this is a combination of samples. This is not just those samples. And so you can see the 47% 30-hour NDFD in legumes, 62% in orchard grass, and 72% in annual grasses. So, the real question is what's that do for milk production if you're milking cows? And the rule of thumb that if this is the majority of the diet, it's a 1/2 pound of milk for every point of fiber digestibility. So you guys can run the numbers on this, and there's a tremendous amount of milk here, a tremendous amount of milk. So the soluble fiber portion, I wanted to show that because I think that's important when you're balancing diets, or when I'm balancing diets, is alfalfa tends to be very high in soluble fiber. So if you had a digestion curve, it goes really, really fast. So soluble fiber, soluble proteins, like doing a shot of whiskey or something, it hits your bloodstream immediately. So the soluble fiber does the same thing. It releases immediately in the rumen, and it gives you a quick burst of food for the microbes, the rumen microbes, and then it's gone. So what do the microbes do between meals if you're just feeding a heavy alfalfa diet? They have a whole bunch of food, and then it's gone, and they have nothing to continue to eat and reproduce with. So the soluble fiber that is good in a diet, as long as we've got some more sustained fiber digestibility to go along with that. So I really like a little bit of legume in my forage, whether it's pasture or in a TMR. And then after that, maybe 15% is enough as far as I'm concerned. And you can see the UNDF 240s at the bottom. 45% of that fiber is not going to be digested. And so, we like alfalfa, but wow, it's just not a very digestible forage. All right, so I ran some diets here through the model. I used 12-month-old heifers, 12-month-old 800-pound heifers, which is a pretty good heifer. That would mean she was 100 pounds at birth, and she gained 700 pounds in 12 months, which would be a 1.9 average daily gain. Pretty decent gain. We hear the number 2 pounds average daily gain on Holstein heifers. And I can tell you that that's a tough one. I have a lot of dairies that we work hard at that. And we really balance cost and gains. And typically it's 1.8, 1.9 on my really well managed dairies. So you can see the ME is energy growth, MP is metabolizable protein growth. And so the annual grasses are fairly well balanced, as are the orchard grass, really not quite as good. But when we get over to alfalfa, we've got a whole bunch of protein there and not as much digestible energy. And so that just legumes get really, really difficult to have a well-balanced diet. All right, so to me, the first place to start, if you want to try some annuals, is start with triticale. You can drill it into a current pasture. You can drill it into a field, an old hay field that you're going to plow up next year. On dairies I work with, we typically put it in corn or soybean fields and double crop those fields. But that's, if you don't have any experience, that would be the place I would start. Triticale is just a beautiful feed, and it really grows well. Talking to the agronomists, they recommend drilling it instead of just spreading it on top of the ground. I do work with dairy farmers that just broadcast it on the ground and lightly disc it in, but the plants are a lot healthier. They get a better root system if you drill it. And they'll yield better. Peas and oats are great for spring and fall forage. Peas can fix 80 to 100 pounds of nitrogen. So that'll help on your fertility and help feed those grasses. And it's probably kind of a constant source of nitrogen as they're growing. Now, I've seen numbers where peas, I actually changed this slide because I had a number, that I'd read that peas will supply 150 pounds of nitrogen. And talking to my Western New York crop guys here, they're like, no way, it's not that much. So I reduced it to 80 to 100 pounds. And some of that is just peas that are in full bloom and they're really, really cranking the nitrogen in the ground. So you're going to graze them before they get to that point. Summer annuals, I struggle with them a little bit. I do grow a bunch of summer annuals. I grow Italian ryegrass and Sudan grass. I have a hard time waiting to June 1st to plant something. It's, so I'm going to change my strategy a little bit. I really like them for grazing and for hay though. All right, so here's one of the reasons that I think we should be considering annual grasses. On dairies, on farms I work with, we're always talking about fixed costs and maximizing production and without changing our fixed costs. We can't, if you got a barn or you own land, you can't change that. You got to pay for those things. So and land is expensive, at least where we are. So I think you better maximize production on that land. And these are tons of dry matter per acre. I've got guys that get 3 to 4.5 ton of triticale every year. So I use these, 3 tons of an annual perennial would be 7.5 tons at 40% dry matter. So, that's 3.5 ton is probably typical for a lot of the perennials. Triticale can do that with just one crop. And then you got your summer annuals in that you may graze 3 or 4 times throughout the summer. The recovery on those is really, really fast if we've got some water, some moisture. So those, my thing is to graze triticale early and then have your summer annuals there, or peas and oats, and graze through the summer. I'm changing my strategy a little bit this year, and we'll go over that. So corn silage, a lot of dairies grow corn silage, lots and lots of corn silage, because they can maximize the amount of feed they get off per acre. They can utilize their manure. So 8.5 ton of dry matter is 24 ton corn silage at 35 dry matter. So that's a pretty decent corn silage, and we can get really close to that if we do a combined series of annual grasses. So it's corn silage is not the only way to maximize production and feed cows high forage diets. I always get a kick when I read articles about high forage diets, and they're feeding like 80% corn silage for a forage. Like, that's not a high forage diet. Corn silage is 40 to 50% grain, so we can all do that. It makes it look really, really easy to feed cows high forage. Well, you're not doing it. Now if you're going to feed them these annual grasses, you will achieve a high forage diet. So these are the crop inputs. I bought a no-till drill just because I wanted to be able to drill myself when I wanted. So I drill everything at least once a year, most of it twice a year. So I bought a no-till drill, but this is really common, a common custom drilling price. I included the current fertilizer prices, which are, I just got them last week, and they're up. Their nitrogen is expensive. Phosphorus is really expensive. So I included these inputs. The seed cost is going to vary depending on what you're doing. So if we did both of these crops, we did a winter annual and then a summer annual, you're going to have about $245 an acre with your fertilizer and your drilling costs. So here's the cost of the annuals, and that may vary, but I think the yield advantage is really there. You might talk 4 ton of dry matter or 3 ton of dry matter, but do the math yourself in your situation. But I think there's quite a yield advantage to growing annuals. And if $200 hay, if hay's $200, which I guess I'd like to know where you're buying $200 hay right now, but that's $235 a ton per ton of dry matter. So the benefit is after your costs is $930 an acre. And I went through this math 20 times because I kept saying, no way, no way, no way, it's not. But change the numbers, do the math. There is quite a benefit to doing this. It's more work, it's more labor, it's more planning, it's more upfront costs. But if you're a dairyman or a farmer, you're used to that. So, all right, here's a diet. I mentioned that I do some custom heifer raising, and this is my first cut triticale orchard grass sample that I showed earlier, and the grain that I'm supplementing. So I've got these heifers are 10 months old right now, and they're ridiculously huge. They're big, actually. So they've averaged 2 to 2.3 pounds average daily gain on this diet. And I change it a little bit, obviously, as they grow, but these heifers are 10 months old and they've been cycling for 2 months already. They've been showing wicked heats for 2 months. So you might ask, well, why would you feed protein in the diet? I'm already 17.4% protein. And there's a bunch of work out there, whether it's Mike Van Amberg at Cornell or Jeff Dahl. I've had the chance to work with him out of Florida. And there is some real value in supplementing heifers a little bit of good quality protein. I have dairies that say, well, I want to just feed them haylage, and we never get the growth rates we want by just doing that. So I think it's really important to supplement them based on your goals. If your goal is 1.5 or 1.6 pounds average daily gain, that's fine. But this dairy pays me to raise their heifers, and they told me their goal is 2 pounds average daily gain. So I better do it, so that's why I buy. But this is what they are actually eating right now. This is a diet from a dairy that I work with. It's one of the early dairies that was growing triticale. And this is actually a lower forage diet than we typically do on this dairy. And it's an old diet from last year. But this dairy, this is a 2X dairy in tie stalls. He milks 100 cows in tie stalls. And this dairy is 85 to 90 pounds all the time. And we get as high as 75% forage in these diets, depending on inventories and depending on quality. But He's 80, I think he was 88 pounds last week with a very similar diet, and 4.3 butterfat and 3.3 protein. So, you know, for a 2X dairy, he does really well. And triticale was the key component. When we started growing triticale, we quit BMR corn silage, which I do like. And he went to a master's choice type corn silage, a good digestibility, but not BMR. And gosh, we feed triticale all year on this dairy. So as you can see here, I do have some good quality alfalfa. So my numbers, the first number on my label is dry matter, and then protein, and then NDF and energy. And so that third cutting alfalfa is 25% protein. It's a really good, for alfalfa, it's really good. It's a really good forage. And that gives us some really fast soluble protein and really fast soluble fiber. And then our triticale balances that out. All right, so like I said earlier, the Holstein heifers that are here have averaged 2 to 2.3 average daily gain. Now, if you came out there's a Jersey cross that you would say, that Jersey's not that big, and you're right, she's not, but she's a Jersey. I just taped them and weighed them just over the weekend. And the height at the withers is 53 to 55 inches. So I always refer to the Penn State heifer growth charts. I think they're awesome to look at and to, you know, use as a guide for whether your program's working or not. These weights on the heifers were taped weights. I do not have a scale, so, you know, take that with a grain of salt, but I think they're relatively close. Last year I sold some Angus yearlings about this time of year. They weren't yearlings because they were born in the summer, so they were only 7-8 months old. But on all grass, and on their mamas, I had averaged 3.25 to 3.75 average daily gain. And I really don't know the I should know the standard for beef cattle, but I really don't know what that should be. And maybe someone can tell me what they're getting for gains, but that is real. That those were weighed because I sold them, and those are real gains. So last year, this is 2021, so it's been 2 years ago. My program was triticale and then peas and oats in the spring, and then I went back in with peas and oats in the fall. And I was just trying to figure out which way to go. So this is a picture of oats and peas. You can see the peas in there. This was last year, and this is my field, one of my fields that I pastured last year. And this, I did Dan Olson's cocktail mix. So I had triticale, and we grazed the triticale. And the tough part was I had to wait till June 1st to plant the Italian ryegrass, Sudan grass, and the clover. But we drilled that in. The Italian ryegrass really didn't come until late in the year. So I think that needs a little bit of an earlier start than Sudan grass. But what I do is so triticale comes off, I drill the cocktail in after that, or I did. And after I grazed the Italian ryegrass twice, I drilled triticale back in that live field. And then I grazed again in the fall when I had triticale up 10 or 12 inches and the Italian ryegrass and Sudan grass. So that was last year. And we really did get great yields. I'm doing this partly because I'm into the annual grasses. I want to grow really, really good animals. I love growing nice, big, healthy animals, and I'm on limited acres. So I need to really maximize production on my ground. So this year, I'm going to go out as soon as I can get on the ground. I've got triticale out there now, and I'm going to drill my Italian ryegrass, clover, and peas and oats. And that is not a picture of my farm there. We just pulled that. But so that's my plan. As soon as I can get on the ground for this year, and that's already in place. But I've got some ideas of how to do it better next year. So next year, I'm hoping to. I wasn't sure if Austrian winter peas would winter over this far north, but everyone's telling me that they will. So I'm going to go in with my triticale, just like I did last year after I grazed a couple times. It'll be August when I go in and drill my triticale, but I'm going to include Austrian winter peas, Italian ryegrass, and clover. So I'm hoping that the Italian ryegrass and the peas and the clover will be established enough that next spring I don't have to go back in and drill again, but we'll see how that works. And the Austrian winter peas are supposed to really supply a bunch of nitrogen. So that's my plan for next year. All right. So like I said earlier, we run these diets through models. It used to be we just plugged in and looked at numbers, and now you can actually put the cow in. You can put her size in, her age, her stage of lactation, her days carried calf. You can put all these inputs into these models, and they really are pretty darn accurate. So like I said earlier, the rule of thumb, a rough rule of thumb, is 10 points of digestibility, 30-hour NDFD is 5 more pounds of milk. If you can go 20 points, you go back and look at those other grasses, the difference between alfalfa and the other grasses, I don't remember, the number's like 30 points. So there literally is a tremendous amount of milk there. And it means more forage, less grain, if you're feeding grain. I know Betsy went over diets last week, and I balance diets for grazers, and typically it changes every other week, it seems like, but we're trying to supplement energy to those animals. That's the biggest thing. We got lots of protein and lots of good fiber out there. And that's a challenge because cows don't really want to eat that stuff when they've got lots of good grass out there. So if we can increase our energy to these cows on the grass that they're eating, there's going to be a huge benefit. There's going to be more fiber in that room and a better mat. It's going to be a more constant rate of digestibility, and we're going to see way more milk. Holstein heifers, I really believe you're going to get a 1/2 to 3/4 of a point increased average daily gain. My animals show that. Like I said earlier, 1.6, 1.7 is really pretty common for heifer growth rate. My best commercial guys are 1.8 to 2, and we literally have been over 2 on ours. My beefers, my cows are too fat. I got a couple neighbors, buddies that give me a hard time because my cows are too fat, and I need to figure out a way to not get my cows so fat. But I laugh because I said to my wife, I showed her an article in a beef magazine here that came, and a lot of the articles in beef magazines are focused on how to get your cows bred back this summer because they're thin and they lost a bunch of weight over the winter. So we can't just feed them mineral and expect them to get pregnant. We gotta supplement them with something to put some condition back on, so they're ready to reproduce. And I don't know, I'm worried mine are just too fat. So, but I do know you can really gain on the finishers. If you could separate your cows from the animals you're finishing, and you're a grass finishing operation, I think this is the way to do it. And the marbling, I try to figure out how much marbling is genetic, the cows themselves, and how much of it's feed. And I'm sure there's a combination of both of those. I've got big fat Angus girls, so they're really marbled. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. Hopefully that was informative. My email is on there and my phone number is on there, and I'm happy to talk to anyone that has questions or yeah, send me an email, whatever. I'm happy to have a discussion.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. That was really great. Like I have things to ask, but Ben chatted in a question, and I'm going to let Ben talk. He can unmute himself and go ahead, Ben. You can ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right,
I
sweet.
can.
Hi, Don. For when you were going over your 2020 cropping season with your annuals, were you what did you do for weed suppression? It kind of sounded like you did successive drilling and just hoped that the next crop would shade out anything that you didn't want there from growing.
You're exactly right. So the one thing I did last year is so my farm, when I bought this little farm, it was wood. It had grown brush for 25 years. So all this in this picture that's up now, that was trees. So I spent a couple of years on a bulldozer clearing this land, and it was extremely low pH, extremely low organic matter. And so I'm still trying to level these fields a little bit better. So I had a neighbor who's a large dairy come up with a speed tiller after triticale, and he speed tilled it just to help level it off. And I think it helps suppress weeds as well, Ben. But my goal is to not use herbicide. I don't want to use Roundup. So I may do some minimum tillage, like have them speed till every few years. But other than that, I'm not. And so far, I have not had any issue with weeds. So my goal is to have a forage there growing all the time that really suppresses weed growth.
Okay, so your winter triticale is your insurance policy for weeds then that come in spring to start it all over again.
I'm hoping.
Okay.
We'll see. So far, it's worked that way, Ben. And we'll, I could tell you that I know that's going to work, but I don't for sure.
Okay. Well, thank you. This helps.
Thanks.
All right. If anybody else has a question, you can put it in the chat, or you can do that little raise your hand thing, and we can allow you to unmute yourself too. So feel free to do either one. While we're waiting for questions to come in, Don, I wanted to go back to, you had early on when you're talking about grass production and units of N. I've had great conversations with Joe Lawrence with Pro Dairy, talking about putting on units of N and getting tonnage increases, or getting protein increases. And one thing I talked to him about, I graze beef cows as well, and I don't necessarily want all of the protein increase. I don't want a full shot of N to all of it, but I want the tonnage increase. And so he and I came up with, if you do a 50% shot of N, we'll get the yield increase and not all of the protein. And that's true with our hay fields too. So didn't know if you had any comments about that or experience.
Well, so it's hard to maximize production and limit protein, because N does go to protein. And maybe split applications would help you, or maybe doing more throughout the summer may help you. I guess you're right. We don't need that protein, especially with all that digestible fiber, because the rumens are going to make microbial protein, and that the rest of it just makes them squirt. So I guess probably that's a good strategy to try. I'm not sure how that will work on yields. Again, the tonnages, it's nutrients in and nutrients out, that those crops utilize. So I'm worried that to maximize your tonnage, you're going to have to accept some of that protein. I will say, so last year, or the last several years, or no, actually from the start, I've used, I have used poultry manure, and I have used urea and ammonium sulfate. This year I'm going to a liquid. I got a sprayer from one of my clients that I bought, and I'm going to liquid only because last summer we were so dry. I'd be waiting for the forecast to say rain, and then I'd go get a spreader with urea and ammonium sulfate, and I'd spread it, and then it didn't rain for 2 weeks, and I just got really, really frustrated that I just wasted my money.
Protected urea is a great thing.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm gonna spray it on this year. I think, I'm gonna use smaller applications of liquid and try to get it on that way.
Awesome. So in the chat, we've got a question from Mary Kate and or Leith. I'm assuming it's from Mary Kate because it's, I don't know, that's my assumption. So are there?
I was going to assume it was from Leith.
All right. Well, I could ask them to unmute, but we won't. I will allow them to talk and see if they do.
Hey, Mary Kate.
Hey, Don.
It is. All right.
Betsy, well, Leith's here too, but yeah, Betsy's right. So I was just thinking about folks, I mean, for a lot of dairies that are experienced growing corn silage, it might not be that big of a shift to plant some of these crops, but if there are people that are, maybe less experienced with cropping programs, like what are the risks of switching from perennial pasture to growing annuals? And are there things people need to think about doing to mitigate any risks with, getting those yields that you?
So yeah, that's a great question. And of course there are risks. And that's one of the reasons that, dairies don't want to change what they're doing because they're getting by and they're making out okay. And gosh, why would I change it if it's not working? And, it's really neat because in my position, I get to sit in meetings with the bankers, the veterinarian, the agronomists, myself, and the dairymen, and we go over those things and we balance the risks. The one thing I would say, Mary Kate, is start small and try a field or two. And like I said in the beginning, if you've never had experience with annuals, I would start with triticale. Start with your poorest seeding of grass and drill triticale into it in the fall, or go over it with a disc just to break it up and drill triticale in, and then go from there. I think I said it, but I've been really frustrated with my Sudan grass yields, and they've been decent, but it hasn't been great. And so that's why I'm incorporating a little more Italian ryegrass into this and trying to improve my yields and still have that real good digestibility. But, to me, the thing is to start small, get some experience with it, fertilize it like you're supposed to, and watch your animals go on it. It's the animals love it. And I think that's just get started. Just get started with a little bit.
So that's a great lead in. We all love cows. We know how cows like to graze. When you go into this beautiful field that you have in this picture here, how do you set up fencing? Do you let them go in one big, like that looks like a 10-acre field? What do you do? How many animals go on that?
So it is a 10-acre field. You're absolutely right. And so this has a high tensile fence around it. And so since Leith's there, he's always given me a hard time about my crappy fencing. So so Leith, so you guys know when we go away, he takes care of my animals for me, which is awesome. But he's always nervous that my cows are going to get out because my fences are bad. But anyway, this field has a high tensile fence around it. I have water out there. I split it down the middle, and then I move a wire twice a day. And I have 50 animals out there, typically 40 to 50 animals out there, big girls. So my Holstein heifers, turn a year in June. So I'll have my 19 Angus cows, their calves, a half a dozen feeders, and my 24 Holstein heifers will all be out there. So, and like I said, that's another reason why I feel like I have to really push these forages, because I am limited on acres, and I do I want to graze as much as I can.
What sort of grazing height do you go in on? And how long does this field last those animals?
So with the Sudan grass, you know, I was really nervous about Sudan grass and having it tall enough before we went in there, because of prussic acid risks. And the same thing in the fall when it got nipped by a frost, because the prussic acid is supposed to be up. So, you know, I move a back fence on this field, but not every day. And I move the front fence twice a day. So they go in probably when it's waist high in the beginning. You know, I would say 30 inches. And by the time we get to the end of the field, it's it's over their heads and I can hardly see them. But they so I move a fence twice a day, move a back fence every couple days, and a 10-acre field, in good growing conditions, this field lasts me for probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I'm guessing, because I don't have a calendar in front of me that I wrote it all down, but
You don't have a grazing chart in front of you.
Mary Kate's gonna fix me up with that.
Yes, if she doesn't, I will.
All right, all right.
Yeah, awesome. Alicia, what questions do you have? I don't see any in the chat.
You had been talking about that spreadsheet. Is that something towards the beginning of your talk? Is that something that's available online, or should folks contact you if they're interested in it? Where could we potentially find that resource?
So that is available online. That's a spreadsheet that I pulled off online, and I think the agronomists, the crop guys I work with probably could get you some information on these removals. But you can see at the bottom of this is A&L Labs, A&L Canada Laboratories, and I just happened to find this. It's fact sheet number 153. I happened to find this online a couple of years ago, and I've been passing it out and emailing it to people that I work with that have questions about this. And one of the reasons that I think this is really important, like the manure portion of this, it gives you the percent solids, it gives you the organic N and the NH4 N. So, you know, nitrogen in manure is part of it's like soluble protein and rumen degradable protein and rumen undegradable protein. You know, you got some that's available right now, and then some of that nitrogen's tied up in organic matter and is a longer term release. So, but that's just A&L Canada Labs, and I like it, so I pass it out.
Awesome. I'll just throw a shout out to our crop people on staff too. All of our regional teams have agronomists on staff that can help walk you through a spreadsheet like this, or help you come up with what your farm might need for a particular situation. So reach out to us, because I can help you, but I don't have all the answers.
That makes two of us, Betsy.
Right. All right. So I don't see any more questions out there. Don,
They all
anything?
left an hour ago.
Well, we post these right after, and so I think a lot of people, the timing might not work exactly great, and so they'll just view the recording later. So we do invite people to send us questions via email, and you have your email up there, Don, so we'll make sure if they have questions, we can get them to you too. So and then Ben just said Cornell Crops Guide has some good info too. Great. We can try and
Very
find
good.
a link for that too. Thanks, Ben. So, Don, any last parting words of wisdom?
I don't know about wisdom. So working with dairies over all of these years, I'm going to put my dairy back up there. It's been interesting because there's something that affects cows that doesn't show up on forage samples. And I am absolutely convinced that if you have really good soil health with good organic matter in it, and you're fertilizing and feeding these crops, that it's a whole lot easier to make milk. It's a whole lot easier to get good gains on your cattle. You know, I have some dairies that I'll run a 15% protein diet with 24% starch, and the cows just always cruise. And then I've got other dairies where I got to run 17.5% protein and 30% starch, you know, put soy hulls, wheat midds, non-forage fibers in, just to try to reach the production goals. And I am convinced that if we feed these soils and have healthy microbes there and feed our crops, we will produce.
Awesome. Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we enjoy having you on. It was so great to have you present today. So thank you so much.
All right. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah. Alicia, any parting things? I'll let you take it away.
Just a reminder that the survey is going to pop up. So give us some feedback on Don's talk, and we'll be sure to share that with him. So when he gives this talk again in the future, he knows what he can improve on or what he did a great job on. But Betsy and I think it was great. And thank you all for joining. And next week, we're going to be talking about lameness and pastures. So feel free to join us then, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.